The sun rose softly over Ndalani village, spreading warm light over the red earth and round clay huts. Smoke from morning fires rose slowly into the pale sky. The air smelled of roasted maize, firewood, and morning dew. Goats bleated in the distance, and chickens scratched at the ground looking for food. The village was awake, calm, and full of life. Inside one small hut with walls the color of honey, Amani sat beside his wife, Zuri. In her arms was a tiny baby wrapped in soft fabric. The baby's skin was smooth like fresh palm fruit, and her small hands opened and closed as she made soft sounds. The parents looked at her with wide smiles and shining eyes. Outside, women began to sing. Their voices rose like birds, warm and steady, carrying the joy of a new birth. The men played drums that beat like a heartbeat, dum, dum, dum. The rhythm traveled through the air and reached even the farthest huts. Zuri looked down at her baby. "She is so small," she whispered. "Look at her fingers, Amani. They are like tiny shells." Amani nodded, his voice soft. "She is strong too. Look, she moves already. She has spirit." Soon, Elder Mosi arrived. He was tall, with gray hair and kind eyes. The children always followed him, for he told stories under the baobab tree every evening. He entered the hut slowly, leaning on his walking stick. "Ah," he said with a smile, "a new life has come to Ndalani today." The baby moved and made a small cry, and everyone laughed softly. Zuri lifted her a little so the elder could see her face. "She is beautiful," said Elder Mosi. "What name have you chosen for this little one?" Zuri and Amani looked at each other. They had talked about it many times, under the stars and by the river. Amani spoke first. "We will call her Talia." Mosi nodded. "Talia," he repeated slowly. "It means gentle rain. That is a good name. May she bring life wherever she goes, just as rain brings life to dry land." He placed his hand gently on the baby's head and whispered a prayer in the old village language. The soft sound of his voice filled the room, and even the drums outside slowed down as if listening. When the prayer ended, Elder Mosi smiled again. "Take care of her well," he said. "A child is like a seed. If you care for it with love, it grows strong. If you forget it, it fades." Amani and Zuri nodded. They knew his words were full of truth. Later that morning, the sun rose higher, lighting up the red paths and tall grasses. Villagers came to visit, bringing gifts, baskets of groundnuts, sweet fruits, and bright cloth. Each person touched the baby's little hand and gave a blessing. "May she walk with courage," said one woman. "May her eyes always see kindness," said another. "May her laughter bring peace to her home," said the village chief's wife. Zuri listened to each blessing and smiled. She felt warmth in her heart. Every word felt like a soft cloud wrapping her baby in safety. Outside the hut, children ran and played, shouting and laughing. The drums continued, their sound joining the rhythm of feet on the ground. Even the trees seemed to sway gently as if dancing with the joy of the day. In the afternoon, when the visitors had gone, Amani sat under the shade of the baobab tree with Talia in his arms. He watched the wind move through the grass. A bird landed nearby, a bright blue one with a long tail. Amani smiled and said softly, "Look, little rain, even the birds come to see you." Zuri came and sat beside him. "Do you think she will be happy here?" she asked. "She will," Amani said. "This village will watch over her. The people here have big hearts." Zuri leaned her head on his shoulder. For a long moment, they said nothing. They just listened to the sounds of Ndalani, the buzz of insects, the soft call of doves, the laughter of children far away. Evening came slowly. The sky turned orange and pink. Smoke from cooking fires rose again, curling into the air. Zuri took the baby inside and laid her down on a small woven mat. She hummed a soft song, one her mother used to sing to her when she was small. The baby's eyes closed, and she slept peacefully. Amani entered the hut and sat beside his wife. "You are tired," he said. Zuri smiled faintly. "A little. But when I look at her, I forget everything else." He nodded. "She is our light now." That night, after they ate roasted yams and stew, they sat outside under the stars. The moon hung low and bright. Elder Mosi's words echoed in their minds, A child is like a seed. Amani thought of his small garden near the river, where he grew cassava and maize. He knew how much care the plants needed: water, sun, and patience. Raising Talia, he thought, would be just the same. As they sat quietly, an owl called from the forest. Zuri held Talia close, wrapping her in a soft cloth. "Sleep, little one," she whispered. "You are safe." Inside the hut, the fire burned low. Shadows danced on the walls. The village was silent except for the soft rustle of the night wind. Amani watched his wife and daughter and felt something deep inside him, a promise forming, quiet but strong. He whispered, almost to himself, "We will protect you always, little rain." Days passed, and Ndalani village continued its peaceful rhythm. Each morning, the rooster crowed, and women carried pots to the river. Men worked in the fields. Children chased one another between the huts. Life was simple, steady, and full of small joys. Zuri spent her days caring for Talia. She talked to her softly while cooking or washing clothes. Sometimes she sang lullabies, sometimes she told her little stories. Amani would come home from the fields, his hands rough and dusty, but his eyes full of pride when he saw his baby smile. One afternoon, rain began to fall, light at first, then steady. The villagers ran to bring their clothes from the lines, laughing and calling to one another. Amani stood at the door, holding Talia. "Look," he said, "the gentle rain comes, just like your name." Drops tapped on the roof, cool and sweet. Zuri smiled. "Maybe the heavens are blessing her," she said. Amani nodded. "Maybe so." The rain washed over the earth, darkening the soil and making the grass shine. The scent of wet clay filled the air. It felt as if the whole village breathed together, calm, thankful, alive. That night, when the rain stopped and the moon came out again, Amani and Zuri sat quietly with Talia between them. They did not speak much. They just looked at her, their hearts full. In her sleep, Talia made a small sound, almost a sigh. Her hand moved as if she were touching something in a dream. Zuri brushed her tiny cheek. "She dreams," she said softly. Amani smiled. "She dreams of the rain." Outside, the baobab tree stood tall against the night sky, its great branches spreading wide. Somewhere among them, an owl called again, and the village dogs barked faintly. But inside that small hut, everything was peace. Amani leaned close to Zuri and said once more, "We will protect you always, little rain." The words were simple, but they carried the strength of love, the patience of the earth, and the promise of a father who knew that in the heart of Ndalani, under the rising sun and the falling rain, nothing was more precious than the life of his child. Days passed, and laughter filled the small clay house of Amani and Zuri. Every morning, the sun rose golden over Ndalani village, and baby Talia's soft cries blended with the songs of birds outside. The little girl was growing fast. Her eyes were bright, her smile sweet, and her laughter filled every corner of their home. Neighbors often stopped by just to see her tiny face and hear her happy sounds. One bright morning, the sky was clear and full of soft white clouds drifting like cotton. The air was cool, and the smell of wet grass still lingered from a light rain during the night. Zuri tied a scarf around her head and prepared to fetch water from the nearby stream. Amani had gone early to the fields, and the village was slowly coming to life. Children ran between huts, goats called from their pens, and women started fires to cook breakfast. Zuri looked around the yard. The tall baobab tree stood proudly near their home, its wide branches casting a deep shade on the ground. Under that shade, she placed Talia in a small woven cradle made from palm leaves. She spread a soft cloth beneath the baby and tucked her gently inside. The cradle rocked slightly with the breeze, making a quiet creaking sound. Talia was calm and sleepy. She reached out her tiny hand and held onto the colorful beads tied around her wrist. Zuri had made those beads herself, using red and yellow seeds from the forest. The beads shone gently in the morning light. Zuri smiled and leaned over to kiss her baby's forehead. "Sleep, my little rain," she whispered. "Mama will be back soon." The birds sang above, bright green parrots and small brown sparrows, filling the air with cheerful noise. The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying the smell of wildflowers. Zuri looked back once more before walking away. Talia slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling. The path to the stream was narrow, winding between bushes and rocks. Zuri walked with a calm step, her empty pot balanced easily on her head. The sound of running water grew louder as she neared the stream. It sparkled under the sun, clear and cool, flowing gently between smooth stones. At the riverbank, she met her friend Lena. Lena was washing clothes, humming a slow song as she rubbed the fabric on a rock. When she saw Zuri, she waved and laughed. "Ah, you are late today." "I had to wait until Talia fell asleep," Zuri said, lowering her pot into the water. "She woke early and didn't want me to go." Lena chuckled. "She already has your spirit. Strong and full of life." Zuri smiled, feeling proud. "Maybe she does." They filled their pots and sat on a large rock near the water. The stream murmured softly beside them, and butterflies fluttered between reeds. The two women began to talk about the village, who was getting married, whose goats had wandered into whose garden, and who had danced too long at last night's celebration. Lena laughed so hard at one story that she nearly dropped her pot. Zuri joined in, her laughter echoing across the quiet water. For a moment, she forgot the time. The soft wind brushed her face, and the scent of mango trees drifted by. It was a peaceful day, the kind that made the heart rest. But far behind them, in the yard under the baobab tree, the breeze was growing stronger. The cradle rocked slowly at first, then a little more as the wind picked up. The leaves above rustled like whispers. Talia stirred, her tiny fingers moving. She opened her eyes, blinking at the light that danced through the leaves. A butterfly, yellow and black, landed near her cradle. The baby watched it curiously, waving her hands. Her beads glimmered as she moved. She made a small sound, half laugh, half coo. High above, a branch swayed. A few birds flew away, startled by the change in the wind. One leaf fell gently onto Talia's blanket. She kicked her legs, enjoying the little movement, unaware of the world beyond her small cradle. Back at the stream, Lena was talking about her brother's new cow. "He says it can give enough milk for 3 families, she said proudly. Zuri laughed again. "Then your brother should share some with me. Amani loves his porridge with milk." The two women laughed harder. They were happy and free in that moment, surrounded by nature's calm sounds. Neither noticed how the wind had grown stronger in the distance, bending the grass and shaking the treetops. After a while, Lena began to rinse her clothes, and Zuri stood up to balance her pot again. "It is time I go," she said, brushing dust from her skirt. "If Talia wakes, she will call for me." "Go, my friend," Lena said, "and tell Amani to visit my husband. We have work to plan for the planting season." Zuri nodded and smiled, lifting her pot with easy grace. The walk back to the village felt warm and pleasant. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and the air carried the sound of distant drumming from the village square. As she walked, she thought about her daughter, her small hands, her soft laugh, her bright eyes. She felt her heart swell with love. Every day she thanked the spirits for this gift. Talia had made their home brighter, their mornings full of purpose. She hummed a song her mother had taught her long ago, a song about mothers and daughters and the cycle of life. Her voice mixed with the wind, gentle and sweet. Near the edge of the village, she saw 2 boys chasing each other with sticks, laughing wildly. One of them called, "Mama Zuri, is the baby sleeping?" "Yes," Zuri replied with a smile. "She is resting under the baobab." The boys grinned and ran off again. As Zuri came closer to her home, she noticed the branches of the baobab moving more than usual. The wind had truly picked up now, shaking the leaves and tossing dust around the yard. She quickened her steps, careful not to spill water from her pot. She set the pot down near the door and brushed the hair from her face. "Ah, this wind," she murmured. "It comes and goes so quickly." Then she looked toward the cradle. It still sat beneath the tree, but the cloth cover had blown partly aside. The cradle rocked softly back and forth, pushed by the wind. For a moment, Zuri thought she saw Talia's small hand waving above the edge, then it disappeared again. She walked closer, smiling to herself. "You are awake already, little Rain," she said softly. "Did you miss Mama?" But as she reached the cradle, she saw something that made her pause. The colorful beads were catching the sunlight and glittering brightly. A small brown feather lay beside them on the blanket. Zuri frowned, puzzled. She looked up into the branches of the tree, where a few monkeys often played in the mornings. The leaves moved, and a small sound, like a giggle, echoed above her. She could not see clearly what it was, but she heard the rustle of movement, quick and light. Her heart beat faster. "Who's there?" she called softly, though she already guessed the answer. From far above, a shadow leapt between branches, quick as wind. Zuri caught her breath. Then she heard it, a tiny, soft laugh, her baby's laugh. Relief washed through her like cool water. Talia was safe, only startled by the movement of the tree. The cradle rocked again, and Zuri gently steadied it with her hand. She lifted her daughter, holding her close. "Hush now, little Rain," she whispered. "The world is full of surprises, but Mama is here." The wind began to calm, and the baobab's leaves settled into a soft whisper. Birds returned to the branches, singing as if nothing had happened. Zuri looked up once more, half smiling. "Even the trees watch over you," she said softly. High above the quiet village of Ndalani, the morning sun shone through the wide branches of the old baobab tree. The air was still and warm, carrying the smell of dry grass and sweet fruit. In the thick branches sat a small monkey named Quito. His fur was golden brown, and his eyes were full of mischief. Quito was known in the forest for his curiosity. He loved shiny things, shells, seeds, and sometimes even the metal earrings that women wore when they came to the river. This morning, Quito had followed the soft singing of birds toward the village. He often liked to watch people from the trees. They moved differently from animals, slower and louder, and they always carried interesting things: bright cloth, food that smelled good, or beads that glittered in the sun. As he leapt from one branch to another, he stopped suddenly when something caught his eye below. Under the shade of the same baobab tree, a small cradle sat rocking gently in the breeze. Inside lay baby Talia, wrapped in a soft cloth. Her tiny hand moved now and then, catching light as she played with something colorful. Quito tilted his head. Around her wrist shone a band of bright beads, red, yellow, and blue. The monkey's eyes widened. "Shiny," he thought. His tail twitched with excitement. He crouched low on the branch, peering down through the leaves. The beads sparkled again when the baby's hand moved. Quito could not resist. He had to see them up close. Slowly, carefully, he began to climb down. His small hands gripped the rough bark of the tree. The wind rustled the leaves, hiding the faint sound of his movement. Quito's tail curled around a branch for balance as he went lower and lower, his eyes fixed on the cradle. Talia lay quietly, her lips moving as if she were trying to hum a tune she didn't yet know. Her soft hair glowed in the sunlight that filtered through the branches. A butterfly fluttered past her face, and she blinked, smiling in her sleep. Quito reached the lowest branch and paused. He looked around. The yard was empty. The mother was gone, and no one else was near. He grinned a small monkey grin and dropped lightly to the ground. His paws made almost no sound. He crept closer, step by step. The baby moved a little, making a small cooing sound, but did not cry. The beads glittered again, calling to him. Quito crouched beside the cradle. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. There was the smell of milk, the sweet smell of soap, and something warm, something alive. For a moment, he just watched her. He had seen human babies before, but none this close. Her skin was soft and smooth, her fingers tiny like the ends of flower petals. Quito tilted his head, curious and calm. Then, slowly, he reached out one hand. His long fingers stretched toward the beads. The red one caught the sunlight and shone like fire. His heart beat faster. He touched it lightly, just to feel the smooth surface. But at that very moment, Talia opened her eyes. She looked at him, straight into his golden eyes. For a second, neither of them moved. Then, instead of crying, Talia giggled. It was a clear, bright sound, like little bells ringing. Her tiny mouth opened in pure joy. Quito jumped back, startled. His tail flicked, and his foot hit the edge of the cradle. The cradle rocked once, then twice, then tipped over gently onto the soft grass. The baby rolled slightly, landing on her back on the ground. She blinked, surprised but not hurt. The grass was cool and soft beneath her. Her beads shone brighter now in the sunlight. Quito froze, unsure what to do. He had not meant to knock it over. He looked at the baby, then at the fallen cradle, then back at the tree. For a moment, he thought about running. But the baby laughed again, reaching her hand toward him. He tilted his head. She is not afraid, he thought. She wants to play. He took a step closer, then another. Talia waved her hand, the beads flashing once more. Quito crouched beside her, studying her face. Her eyes were dark and wide, full of light. She made a small sound, almost like a word, though she was too young to speak. The monkey sat down cross-legged on the grass. He had never seen a creature like this one who was so small, so gentle, and yet so full of joy. He reached out again, very carefully, and touched her tiny fingers. They wrapped weakly around his, soft and warm. Quito made a quiet chattering sound, curious and happy. Talia giggled again and kicked her legs. Her laughter filled the air, rising into the trees like music. The birds that had flown away earlier began to return, drawn by the sound. A pair of parrots perched on a branch above, watching the strange friendship forming below. For a few minutes, the monkey and the baby simply looked at each other. Quito would tap the grass or move a leaf, and Talia would laugh as if it were the funniest thing in the world. He picked up a small flower and dropped it beside her, and she reached for it with clumsy hands. When she grabbed it, he clapped his little hands together in excitement, chattering softly. The world seemed still and calm around them. The wind had quieted, the leaves barely moved, and the soft humming of insects filled the silence between her laughter and his chatter. But soon, Quito heard something, a distant voice, faint but growing louder. It was Zuri, calling from the path. She was coming back from the stream, her pot balanced on her head. Quito's ears twitched. He looked toward the sound, then back at Talia. The baby laughed again, unaware. She lifted her hand, showing him the beads one more time. Quito hesitated. He wanted the beads, but now he also felt something strange, a feeling he didn't quite understand. The baby reminded him of the small ones in his troop, the tiny monkeys who clung to their mothers. He felt a small tug in his chest, something like care. Zuri's voice was closer now. The monkey looked around quickly. He picked up the cradle with his small hands and tried to push it upright. It was heavy for him, and it wobbled, but he managed to set it straight again. Then he looked at the baby and touched her forehead lightly, the way older monkeys touch their young. Talia smiled again, her eyes shining. Quito made a soft chirping sound, almost like goodbye. Then, with one last look, he turned and leapt back onto the tree trunk. He climbed fast, his tail swinging behind him. Within seconds, he disappeared into the leaves above. Zuri entered the yard, humming softly, her steps calm. When she saw the cradle standing slightly tilted, she frowned. She said, setting her pot down. Did the wind blow again? Then she heard a small sound, the happy laugh of her baby. She hurried closer and found Talia lying on the grass beside the cradle, her hands waving, her beads bright in the sunlight. "Oh, my little Rain," she said with relief, lifting her into her arms. "How did you get down here?" Talia only laughed, her eyes looking up toward the branches above. Zuri followed her gaze but saw nothing, only leaves moving gently in the wind. Far above, hidden among the branches, Quito watched quietly. He held a small flower between his fingers, one just like the one he had given Talia. He made no sound, only smiled a tiny monkey smile. The baby rested in her mother's arms, safe again. The air around them was still, calm, and full of sunlight. Quito climbed higher into the tree, leaping from branch to branch until he disappeared into the green of the forest. His heart was light. He had not taken the shiny beads, but he had found something brighter, laughter. When Zuri came back from the stream, the sun was already higher in the sky, and the air was warm and full of the smell of dust and flowers. She walked carefully along the path, balancing her pot of water on her head. The birds were singing, and the sound of goats bleating echoed from nearby fields. Everything seemed peaceful and calm, just like every other morning in Delani village. She smiled as she thought of her daughter. She could almost see Talia's face, her little hands reaching for the beads on her wrist. "She will be hungry soon," Zuri whispered to herself. She quickened her steps, her feet brushing the dry grass. When she reached the yard, she set the pot down beside the doorway and wiped her forehead. The shade of the baobab tree looked cool and inviting. But when she looked toward the cradle, her smile slowly faded. The cradle was lying on its side. The soft cloth inside was empty. The blanket had fallen onto the ground. The air around her seemed to stop moving. For a moment, she could not breathe. Her eyes widened. "Talia," she called softly, thinking maybe the baby had rolled somewhere nearby. She stepped closer and looked around the base of the tree. There was no sign of her. Her voice rose louder now, shaking. "Talia!" She dropped to her knees and lifted the blanket, her hands trembling. Nothing. The world seemed to blur. The sound of insects filled her ears, loud and sharp. Then she stood up suddenly, panic filling her heart. "Amani!" she shouted, her voice breaking. "Amani! Someone help me!" Her cry carried across the village like a drumbeat. From nearby huts, women stopped their work. Men looked up from the fields. Within moments, people began running toward her yard. "What is it, Zuri?" asked Lena, arriving first. "What happened?" "My baby!" Zuri cried. "She's gone. She was here, under the tree, sleeping, and now she's gone." Lena gasped. "Maybe she crawled away." "She cannot even crawl yet," Zuri said. "She is too small." More villagers gathered. Amani came running, his shirt wet with sweat, his hands full of dirt from the field. "Zuri!" he called, breathless. "What happened?" Zuri turned to him, tears running down her face. "The cradle was empty, Amani. She is gone. Our baby is gone." For a moment, Amani could not move. The words hit him like a storm. His legs felt weak. Then he started running around the yard, calling, "Talia! Talia!" His voice echoed through the tall grass and across the fields. The villagers spread out, searching. Some looked behind the huts. Others walked toward the river, calling her name. The air was full of shouts and the sound of feet rushing through the grass. Zuri stood under the baobab tree, her hands shaking. She looked up at the wide branches, her eyes darting from leaf to leaf. The tree stood tall and still, like it had seen everything. "Please," she whispered to the sky. "Let her be safe. Let my baby be safe." Elder Mosi, hearing the noise, came slowly from his hut with his walking stick. His old eyes looked serious but calm. "What has happened?" he asked. "Our baby is missing," Amani said quickly. "She was sleeping here, under the baobab, and now she's gone." Mosi frowned and looked around carefully. "No footprints of a stranger," he murmured, bending to the ground. "No signs of struggle." He looked up at the tree again, his sharp eyes scanning the branches. Then, as the wind moved the leaves, he saw something, just a flicker of color, something bright like the beads around Talia's wrist. He pointed. "There," he said quietly. "Look at the low branch." Everyone turned at once. Zuri gasped. There, just above their heads, sat a small monkey, Quito. And in his arms, safe and calm, was baby Talia. The villagers froze for a second, too surprised to move. The baby was not crying. She was giggling softly, her small hand reaching for the monkey's fur. Quito held her gently, rocking her back and forth as if he were cradling one of his own. He made quiet sounds, almost like humming. Zuri covered her mouth with both hands. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Oh, thank the heavens," she whispered. "She's alive." Amani stepped closer, careful not to scare the monkey. "Easy now," he said softly. "Don't move too fast." The monkey looked down at them, his head tilted. He didn't seem afraid. He just kept rocking the baby gently, making soft chattering sounds. The villagers watched in silence. Some of them smiled through their fear. "It seems he means no harm," said Elder Mosi. "Look at him. He thinks she is his child." Zuri took a slow step forward, her voice trembling. "Quito," she said quietly, using the name the villagers often used for the little monkey who played near the forest. "You did well. But she is mine, little one. Let me take her now." The monkey blinked, his golden eyes calm. He looked at the baby, then at Zuri. For a long moment, he held still. Then he slowly lowered his arms and placed Talia on the branch beside him. Zuri reached up carefully, her hand steady though her heart was racing. She lifted her baby down, holding her close against her chest. Talia laughed, grabbing a strand of her mother's hair. "Oh, my little Rain," Zuri said softly, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead. "You gave us such a fright." The villagers all sighed together, the tension breaking like a rope snapping free. Some laughed, some clapped, and some wiped their eyes. Amani wrapped his arms around Zuri and Talia both. "She is safe," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "Thank you, thank you." Quito watched them quietly from the branch. He tilted his head again, then gave a small chirping sound, almost like a farewell. He climbed higher into the tree, swinging from one branch to another until he disappeared into the leaves. Elder Mosi looked up and smiled. "Even the forest cares for our children," he said softly. "Today we have all learned something." The villagers began to return to their homes, still talking and laughing with relief. "That monkey," someone said, "he has a kinder heart than some men." Another replied, "Maybe he only wanted to play, but the spirits guided his hands." Amani and Zuri stayed under the tree for a while longer. Zuri rocked Talia gently, humming the same song she used to sing at night. The baby's eyes slowly closed, tired from all the excitement. Amani looked up at the baobab and said quietly, "This tree has seen everything. It will remember today." Zuri nodded. "And I will never forget," she whispered. "Never again will I leave her alone." The wind moved softly through the branches, and a few leaves drifted down like green feathers. The air felt lighter now, peaceful once more. Somewhere in the distance, Quito's small shadow leapt between the trees, free and happy. Elder Mosi walked back slowly, leaning on his stick. As he passed Zuri and Amani, he stopped and said, "Remember, care is not only love. It is also watching, listening, being present. The world is full of small eyes that see what we do not." Zuri looked down at her sleeping baby and nodded. "Yes, Elder. I have learned that today." When the villagers reached their huts again, the story had already begun to spread. Children whispered about the monkey who had become a nurse, and women laughed softly, shaking their heads. It would be told again that evening around the fire, and the next, how a mother's cry shook the village, how a monkey saved a child, and how love and care grew even stronger in Delani that day. As the sun began to set, Amani carried Talia inside their hut. The orange light filled the room, touching the walls with gold. That evening, when the sun began to sink behind the golden hills, the light spread softly over Ndalani village. The sky turned orange and pink, and the air carried the smell of roasted maize and smoke from the cooking fires. It was a calm night, the kind that made the whole village gather together, sharing stories, laughter, and lessons learned. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the people of Ndalani were quiet. Everyone knew what had happened, how Zuri's baby, Talia, had gone missing, and how a little monkey named Quito had surprised them all by keeping her safe. The elders sat around the great fire at the center of the village. Sparks rose into the night sky, floating like fireflies before fading into the stars. The people formed a circle around them, men, women, and children, all waiting to hear the words that would turn this strange and frightening day into a story that would never be forgotten. Elder Mosi sat nearest the flames, his wrinkled hands resting on his walking stick. The firelight flickered across his wise face, making the deep lines of age look like rivers of light. He looked around slowly, his eyes resting on Zuri and Amani, who sat together at the edge of the circle, their baby sleeping safely in her mother's arms. The sound of the crackling wood mixed with the quiet hum of crickets in the grass. "My people," Mosi began, his voice steady and deep, "today, the spirits have reminded us of something we too often forget." His words carried easily through the air, and even the children leaned closer to listen. "We live in a peaceful village. The land gives us food, the sky gives us rain, and our hearts give us love. But peace does not mean safety without care. Love alone cannot guard the ones we cherish. Love must walk with care, always side by side." He paused, letting his words sink in. The fire crackled again, and a small gust of wind passed through the circle, stirring the flames. "Zuri," the old man said kindly, "today your heart was tested. You trusted the peace around you. You left your baby for only a short time, believing the world would stay gentle. But the world is full of surprises, some kind, some cruel, and some simply curious." Zuri bowed her head slightly, her cheeks warm with emotion. She looked at Talia's small face and then at the flames. "I thought she would be safe," she said softly. "I only left her for a moment." Mosi nodded slowly. "A moment can be enough," he said. "A single breath, a single blink, that is all it takes for the world to change. But remember, child, mistakes teach more than comfort ever could. And today, you were given a lesson wrapped in mercy." The villagers murmured softly in agreement. Some of the mothers held their own children closer. Fathers exchanged quiet looks, thinking of their own families. Amani spoke next, his voice low but firm. "When I saw the empty cradle," he said, "I thought the world had ended. But then, when we found her, safe, unharmed, I realized how much we take our blessings for granted. I will never again forget to watch, to guard, to be present." Mosi smiled gently. "You speak with truth, Amani. It is not fear that keeps a child safe, it is attention, patience, and care. You and Zuri have both learned something today that all parents must know." He looked around the circle, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Let this story be remembered. Let every child of Ndalani know that love is not enough. Love is the fire that warms, but care is the watchful flame that keeps the darkness away." The people nodded, their faces glowing in the firelight. A baby in the crowd began to cry softly, and her mother rocked her gently, whispering a lullaby. Zuri smiled faintly at the sight, her heart full but calm now. Elder Mosi lifted his hand, pointing toward the great baobab tree that stood just beyond the firelight. "And let us also remember the one who showed us the gentleness of the forest, Kito, the little one with fur and bright eyes." Everyone turned to look at the tree. Its huge trunk stood strong and silent, its wide branches stretching high into the night sky. The leaves rustled softly in the evening wind, as if whispering secrets. Some of the children gasped quietly, for the sound almost seemed like laughter, light and playful, like the monkey himself. A young boy whispered, "Maybe he's still watching us." Mosi smiled. "Perhaps he is. Maybe the spirits used his curious heart to remind us that care can come from anywhere, even from those we do not expect. So when the wind moves through the baobab leaves, remember it as Kito's whisper, a soft voice saying, 'Be careful, little ones. Watch over your babies. The world is always watching too.'" The villagers sat in silence, listening to the rustling leaves. The stars above shone brighter now, as if they were leaning closer to hear the story too. Zuri looked down at her daughter. Talia was sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. The beads on her wrist caught the light from the fire, glowing faintly red and gold. Zuri brushed her fingers gently over them. "She will grow up hearing this story," she said softly. "She will know that even the smallest ones can teach great lessons." Amani placed his hand over hers. "And she will know that her mother's love never failed her," he said quietly. "It only learned to grow stronger." Mosi nodded approvingly. "Yes," he said. "This day will not be remembered as one of fear, but as one of wisdom." He turned back to the fire, his voice rising once more. "So let us honor this lesson tonight. Let every parent here promise to guard their children not only with love, but with care. Let us remember that the world is full of eyes, some kind, some curious, some unseen, and that our little ones depend on us to keep them safe from all." The villagers raised their voices together in agreement. "We will remember," they said in unison. The sound was soft but strong, like the hum of the earth itself. As the night deepened, songs began to rise from the circle. The drums beat gently, echoing the rhythm of the heart. The women sang lullabies, and the men added their deep voices to the melody. It was not a song of sadness, but of gratitude, for life, for love, for lessons learned. The flames danced higher, painting golden patterns on every face. The children leaned against their parents, their eyes half closed, listening to the sound of voices blending with the wind. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called softly from the forest, and the night grew calm again. When the songs ended, the people slowly began to leave the fire. One by one, they carried their sleeping children home. The air was cool now, the stars wide and endless above the village. Zuri and Amani were the last to leave. They stood for a moment near the baobab tree, the same place where their hearts had almost broken that morning. Zuri looked up at the branches and smiled. "Thank you, Kito," she whispered. for reminding us." A gentle breeze passed through the tree, and the leaves rustled in reply. It sounded almost like laughter again, soft, kind, and full of life. Amani wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and together they walked back toward their home. The fire behind them burned low, glowing like a heartbeat in the dark. When they entered their hut, Zuri laid Talia down on her small mat and covered her with a cloth.